overall. Composite shingle, which is pretty much most everybody's roofs, whether they're an actual house or barn or sheds or anything that you have a space to collect. You know, the typical kind of idea for the safety of composite shingle is, you know, you want to really try to give it a year to 3 years before really utilizing anything off that roof. The asphalt is fairly quick at gassing off. It's fairly inert after a little bit, but sometimes it's the heat adhesives used on the undersides. That's what you kind of need to have more of a worry about than anything. And so there's a general rule of thumb, it's 1 to 3 years for using it for anything really. But then, yeah, using it for gardening and landscaping, you really want to be careful and, you know, using it on the soils instead of on the leaves of anything. But the biggest thing is getting your water tested if you're really going to be using it for anything other than gardening or landscaping. If you're going to be using it for livestock, I would, you know, have it run through the system a few times and then potentially try to get it tested. There's some local agencies that do, you know, really cheap or free testings for stuff like that, which are always recommended for anything that's used, especially for livestock and or human use. Things to avoid are some cedar shake roofs. They have a lot of leaching of tannins and things like that that get into the water that can really just screw up your pH and water quality, whether you use it for irrigation or watering for livestock. Copper roofs are kind of they're a nice thing. They look really great, but they don't really great for irrigation and potentially for livestock use. Copper really reacts well to water, and it does leach out over long periods of time. So you have some mineral and pH issues. You got to be careful of some roofs still used and they're still sold is lead flashing. If you have it at peaks and valleys, you notice it, and you might want to check it out to make sure it's maybe not tin. Make sure it is tin or not aluminum or lead, because yeah, lead is a big one, and it still's, you know, being sold as a product, and it leaches pretty well. So, you know, at the end of it, all of this is kind of, if you're really going to be using it for some pretty big purposes, is getting it tested. You can get pHs, you can get minerals, you can get contaminants, especially coliform, fecal coliform, and things like that. You just got to really be careful for. And then, you know, I'm going to keep moving into some of the other basics of what a system kind of looks like and the things that you can do with it. But first, like Michael had talked about, is, you know, most of the time it's collected from the gutter and then the downspout, and there's various steps that you can put into place at those points before it goes into a catchment system, a barrel, a tote, a large cistern. I'll go over a few of those because that's kind of where the most important thing is for using it either in irrigation or livestock or home use, is those first 3 or 4 steps of catchment. You want to stop, you know, the organic matter that's on your roof that comes into your gutter. You want to stop that pretty quickly, and that's typically done up high, right at the gutter and downspout connection. And you know, that'll eliminate a lot of your organics that get in there and mess with pHs. And then there's a few other filter options after that fact too, that'll really help your water quality, especially if you're feeding livestock with it. We'll go into the next slide. This is what we typically call a first flush diverter. This is really important when using the water for food, irrigation, and livestock. It catches the first few gallons of water coming off your roof, which is typically the most contaminated, and it pulls them in a downward pipe with this float. And then once that pipe fills up, the float closes it off, and the water is allowed to go back through and into your catchment system. It's a really easy and or cheap contraption to make or buy to just get that first contaminated flush of a rain out of the way and not into your system. That's kind of one of the big steps to do on top of what we call, and this is kind of an exaggerated version, but essentially it's another screen after your first screen that will take out any other organic matter, materials, debris that's in this system coming down. It's a kind of a vortex filter where it just kind of centrifuges the water out, and then the organics fall to the side and in this mesh container that you can clean out every now and then. So, you know, there's netting and screening that you can put on in your gutters. There's, you know, those different types of diverters that pull debris out but let the water through. This is kind of an extreme version, but it really works really well. And then my next example of kind of after you've caught it and you're really wanting to use it for livestock especially, is you got your rain storage container, you have a booster pump, because if you're going to need to end up filtering your water in any way after it's been collected, you're going to need a pump. And those you can find pretty nice little pumps. You only need a couple horsepower, if that, to move the water anywhere and through the filter. So having that in between, and then having a certain type of micron filter. There's fiber, there's charcoal, there's carbon that you can choose from of different sizes. So, you know, you step it up from a larger micron filter to a smaller one, weeding out all your particulates. And you can do it in stages, or you can do a single filter depending on the quality of water you're getting into your catchment system. So these are just kind of the basic of some of the nomenclature and things that we do with the rain barrels and what you potentially would need to begin with some of these uses. Like as Michael talked about, there's sometimes a potential thought and need of getting permits for collecting water, but under current RCWs, you do not need any permits to collect any rainwater. I don't think any of us are planning on collecting up to 300,000 gallons, and at that point you're going to need a permit. But with these scales that I'm sure most of us are going to be operating on, there is no need for a permit and no need to do anything else with the city or county that you reside in. The only things that are pertaining to rainwater collection is rainwater must be used on the property where it's collected. Rainwater can only be collected from existing structures that have another purpose other than collecting rainwater. So you can't go off and build a building specifically for collecting rainwater. That's considered illegal and you may need a permit. But if you have existing structures, they already have gutters, they already have downspouts, go ahead and tap right into those and use them as you like. If rainwater collection is negatively affecting water rights in certain areas, sometimes they'll put restrictions on things, but around here we do not have those problems. If you're in Colorado, maybe, but that's the only state you would really have to worry about any kind of collection restrictions. If you're planning on using rainwater as your primary drinking water source for new building construction, you will need to check with your county to see if it's allowed. And then at those points, you will definitely need to have some permitting, because you're already going to be doing work inside your house to retrofit to be able to take in collected rainwater from the outside. But yes, there's plumbing codes and other things that go along with actually turning your rainwater into potable water. It's doable. You just have to do a little more hoops than just collecting it for outside use or gray water use. That's it for the permits. For livestock, which Michael has touched well on, and you kind of got you a pretty good picture of some of the things that you need to do and with that water. There's a whole lot of systems that are available to any one of us, whether it's like these pictured here, these polyurethane cisterns ranging from a couple hundred gallons up to a couple thousand gallons for use. There's a majority in a plethora of ways to set up, put your systems inside, outside. There's space to be able to be utilized, and it's just about being creative and how and where you need it and how you want it to look. Livestock production requires water for cleaning, processing, and direct watering of the animals. Michael stated, he gave you some figures on about the water needs for the animals. So that's, something you really need to consider if that's what the primary use of it is, along with, the potential use of it with other processes on the farm. Rainwater harvesting provides an alternative water source to livestock producers, whether large or small, and rainwater harvesting systems can be a standalone system or connected to an existing building. Uh, you know, most time around here, there's plenty of bigger buildings to be able to connect on, but we're more of a tighter landscape with some of our ag compared to some parts of the country where, there's hundreds of thousands of acres that they're, ranging on or using. And there's systems that you can set up that are standalone out in the middle of a field, hundreds of miles away, or something that it has a small roof and a guzzler of a rain barrel that collects enough water for, livestock when they're out in the middle of nowhere. So that's the difference between a standalone and one that's connecting to an existing building. Most rainwater harvesting systems used by livestock producers are for supplementary water use, i.e. like a backup for a well, but it's always a great way to replace using your well and make the well your backup when needed too, especially if we're in if your well is in a area like Camano Island where it's a isolated aquifer, and there's a lot of considerations to be made on how much gets drawn out of that. There's a lot of others that use it, and as well as the island itself that needs it. But yeah, so then they just need to be, whether it be used for main water source or not, it's up to you and how you want to operate that. But it just must be properly designed so that demand does not exceed the supply. That's kind of the big, overarching thing here is planning your system to have enough to be reliant on it when things aren't working well with the normal water systems, or it's just astronomical rates that you don't want to pay. There's a lot of ways to offset and mitigate a lot of different things when it comes to water supply. And we can come back to with all of these and talk about them and do some more quick Q&A. I'm just going to kind of go through this, and then we'll come back with some great questions, I'm sure. Another thing to be thinking about, whether you have a farm or not, is especially on Camano Island, maybe there's not hydrants and they have to bring their own water out, and you have there's a fire that needs more than what they've bought out with them. And there's some, pretty neat ways to go about having your own supply for fire protection on your property. There's some of the main things to think about is looking at the National Fire Preparedness Association, who is responsible for fire codes and regulations. The NFPA 22 is the document that is kind of the best one that talks about all of our what you're allowed to do and what you can do and what it should be like, the system should be like to better assist fire teams when they need to refill water, and or say you need to use that water yourself on your property if there's nobody else to help you. Then NFPA 22 is a standard that provides requirements for the design, construction, and installation and maintenance of tanks and accessory equipment that supply water for private fire protection. It's kind of just the general scope of what it is. Then this standard provides the minimum requirement for the design, construction, installation, and maintenance of these. Fire suppression storage tanks create a dedicated location for a specific volume of water that can be used by fire departments to supplement or act as the main source of water in fire suppression. In regions where the water is either scarce or not connected to a municipal supply, fire suppression tanks can provide the critical water need for fire protection within your property. And within these codes and regulations that this document provides, it just shows how to set it up and how big and where it needs to be in the case, in the event that it needs to be used. And pretty typical with anything that you're trying to protect your property or home from fire is they need to have clear in and out, egress and ingress to get into your property to help potentially fight on the property and or grab up and refuel with more water to use either there or nearby. water collection doesn't just have to be for your flowers and your garden beds, nor just your animals. And Camano Island's a pretty nice area and are a big risk for a lot of fire, and especially with future climate change issues going on, it's going to be at more risk as we get warmer, and that rain shadow really hits that east side, northeast side of the island there. And these might be more critical in the future than we really realize. And whether it's for home use, in-home use, livestock, or fire suppression, sizing your system is kind of the more important thing to think about. This is a nice little example of a really good side view example of what is basically the gist of a really simple water collection system. This tank here is probably 500 to 700 gallons. It's pulling from all the gutters that are going to the one side of the building, drawing them down and across and into the downward pipes that go into the tank. And then there you see that first flow diverter. It's that long, wider diameter tube that goes past. It will collect that first however many gallons, will then fill up with, there's a ball in that closes that fill up, and then it puts it down into the collection tank. There's an outlet at the bottom for use, and then there's an outlet for that diverter also. And looks like they also in this example have a gutter diverter on that side. So since that roof is a lot smaller, it's only stopping just a little bit of that water from getting over here. And you can do those together, or you can do them in place like they have here. The size and the cost of your rainwater collection system depends on what you plan on doing with the water and how much water you need to store at one time. Simple rain barrels are relatively inexpensive and can be used to reduce the use of potable water for irrigation. Water collection for in-home use requires approval from your local building, like I said, and plumbing systems are strictly regulated through the Uniform Code, plumbing code. So if you're bringing it in the house, there's a lot of different things, but keeping it out of the house, there's no need to really do anything else for plumbing wise that need to meet code. So when we were talking about collection and thinking about your uses, you also need to think about the seasonality of rain and what that may entail. So we have peaks and downs of when we get rainfall, and those peaks and downs may not coincide with how much water you're actually using at that point in that season. Also, sometimes in summer, plants and livestock are going to need more water, and that's when we're not getting as much. So those are the times and things that are really important to really consider when setting up your system. Where at, how much you can collect from that location, and how much is needed. And then you just really got to think about the variables of when you're going to be getting that rainwater and when you're not, and how your use is during those times too. So really, plan accordingly when it comes to your system, because it'd be, if you're going to be relying on something like this, it takes a lot of planning to get it down to the bare numbers that are going to make a difference for you. We can go over some benefits of rainwater collection. That's the example you see on the picture there is kind of that standalone out in the middle of nowhere rangeland wildlife and or livestock guzzler. It's a small roof that's, doesn't seem to be very big, but that little amount of roof will collect enough water, especially around here in a very short amount of time. Rainwater harvesting can have multiple benefits, such as reducing stormwater runoff that can sweep away pollutants into streams and cause erosion and flooding. If we're going to be thinking about livestock, being able to slow down the flow of surface water on a farm and will be greatly beneficial to the surrounding waterways and wherever those go. That's always a nice way to stop a lot of easy to stop pollutants right there with collecting a lot of that runoff water. rainwater collection might not replace your primary water supply. It can help keep your gardens green and while diverting water away from your house, because that's another thing is a lot of gutters on houses go straight to the ground with maybe a foot or two of away. Uh, by setting up these systems, you can really, collect that water, and if you have extra, push it away from your house because we don't want foundation problems in the future. Um, and on top of all this, saving water on your water bill, not being connected, using your municipal water, and just being more reliant on what we get a lot of naturally around here is water. Um, Impervious surface such as driveways, sidewalks, and street block rainfall and other precipitation from infiltrating naturally into the ground. So these, are holding it and moving it somewhere else instead of just running over the asphalt or pavement. You're able to collect it. Rainwater harvesting offers a small scale, best management practice to reduce stormwater runoff and the problems associated with it. Mud, is kind of a livestock area nightmare. And this is, one really great way to reduce a lot of erosion and mud within your property and or farm. By harvesting the rainfall and storing it, you can slowly release the water back in the soil. So if you're not necessarily really having to use it or need it for livestock, and you maybe have a lot of extra, and you want to keep getting fresh water in there instead of letting water sit, it's always a good idea to open it up on a nice sunny day, waiting for that little next rain, just letting that water go out on a time where the ground really could use it. But that's another way to think about stormwater collection is a nice way to slowly release that stormwater at another time back into the soils and the natural waterway. And then by you can either through irrigation and or direct application, and the water moves into the ground table, providing steady supply of water to local streams and the rivers on any given point. Here are just a few examples of some projects we've put together at farms down in the Snohomish River Valley. These were multi-use area farms, from berries and vegetables to pigs, chickens, cows, and horses. So we set up this little 3-tote system. You can kind of see on the left there's a before, and the right's an after. This is a large arena, and we set up a few totes on each side of it, but it's not designed to take it all. We set it up just on one of the downspouts near one of the beams, and this is helping supply some of the water for their blueberries and orchard area. And these totes are about 300 gallons. They're all food grade. They were prior food grade containment containers. They're big polyurethane inside with a metal cage on the outside. We take them out and wrap them in a black liner because we want to reduce all that UV ray getting in there and making things grow, because algae and water with a lot of sun, they'll have a party in your rain catchment and it'll just ruin it. So we try to make them as dark as possible, allowing the least amount of UV light in there to keep that water fresh as possible. On this same farm, it was on the other side of the arena, just a small 2-tote side. With these ones, were going to be used for cattle on the far end of the property. And what's nice about all these is, you can build it as you go too. So maybe your water needs aren't as pressing right away, but you can't say no to a few more head of cattle or another horse that you're rescuing or something, and you need more water. They're really easy to hook up another one to and keep kind of piggyback and leapfrogging onto the system. That's what's the beauty of these is really adaptable to expand. And then one last little example of it was a heavy use area that was getting a lot of overflow. They just originally had the water going to this open little cut open rain barrel. And now we put this tote in, and then you can see there where underneath where the rain barrel is at, there's our overflow goes into it, and at the bottom of the rain barrel there's a feed filter or feed water there where pigs use to get the water out of the overflow. But these are primarily used to water the chickens and then the pigs also. Yeah, and those are some of just examples of things that we've set up, and things that are possible on anybody's property or farm. Like Michael said, we will come out, we will check out your property and see what potential systems or potential projects that are available to you or that you can do on your own. We do sell rain barrels out of the Snohomish Conservation District. We're currently kind of on a taking order basis, but we're working on getting those out to people who get it and who want them. But we have rain barrels available. And then we also provide assistance on locating these totes, these larger cubes that I've been showing here. There's some resources to be able to get a hold of those at a really good price too, because they're pretty hard to come by and they can be expensive, but we've found some pretty good resources to get these at a cheaper price. And they're really, really well for livestock use because they're large, they're really solid, they're stackable. So they're just really modular and you can kind of make it however you want to.
And if I could interject real quickly,
yeah,
too.
No, that's it for me right now, but I keep answering your question.
No, I just wanted to add on to that. Those totes are also transportable. I don't know if you could see on some of the pictures, but if you have a forklift,
yep,
you can pick those up and move them where you need them, which depending on the size of your farm, you can collect water in one area and then move it over to another area. So they're really, really handy.
Yeah, they're very versatile. So yeah, thanks for that one. Haven't really thought about that, but yeah, collecting them at one point, disconnecting it really easy. You can move the pipe and then you pull that thing out, put it out in the field next to a trough or fill a trough with it on your forklift. A lot of different ways you can go around and use these. But that's the end of my presentation. Definitely can talk more and take questions and all that. So I think I'm getting some maybe.
Yeah, Taylor, can you go back to your sizing your system slide, please? Right there. Perfect. So one of our first questions is that first diverter flow. Do you have to empty that, or is that something that is maintenance free?
You can make that maintenance free. Like I think you can kind of see there's probably a little ball valve or a little valve. If you have that ball in there, once that fills up, it should be tight enough that, well, no, I'm thinking about it. You would have to figure something out, because if you were to just kind of leave that open and it would just kind of empty out, you'd never get that water. So you kind of want that to lock out and then flush that water through. So there may be ways to have a low maintenance free, but I'm not thinking of one off the top of my head. I can always find something for anybody and kind of send it back out to this group. But yeah, there should be a way to be maintenance free where you can just let it be. But I'm pretty sure they're mostly fairly maintenance free, but yeah, potential for it is there.
Yeah, and just to clarify, maybe the question was also from the intent of whether that first flow diverter needs to be emptied before using the water in the barrel.
Oh, no, it should be fine. It's holding that water from getting into the barrel. Flushing it at any point is fine, or using the water before you flush it is fine. It's out of the system, because it shouldn't go above where the water inlet is into the tank ever.
Great. Appreciate that. The next question is, someone has a translucent 50-gallon rain barrel. Would you recommend covering it to prevent UV light? Could you cover it? Could you paint it?
Yeah.
What are the most recommended?
For a translucent one, I would recommend trying to paint it. I've seen people try to wrap them in thick plastic, it does last, but it kind of goes away, and so does paint. But I think it's a little easier to continue to apply if needed. But what we do when we get either kind of a translucent or a white rain barrel or water barrel is we just sand it down really well as best as possible, give it a good primer paint, and then paint it in black or a darker color. You can go with the greens like these ones are, but just as dark as possible is the whole goal, is to keep that UV out. But yeah, sanding it and then priming it and then painting it a dark shade. So yeah.
And then just a few more questions about painting rain barrels black, if that's helpful.
Yep.
I feel like overall, if your rain barrel is not translucent, if it's opaque, it's just going to be overall better with preventing that UV light from coming in. So no specific color, like doesn't need to be black, but as long as it's not translucent.
Yep. I think I see one more here. Is freezing a problem? Yes, it definitely can be. Depending on the types of pipes you're using, the diameter of pipes you're using, and the exposure of your system, whether it's kind of hidden on the north side of a structure, or if it's in the sun, those are going to make big differences on what's going to go on in those pipes throughout the year. So recommended is obviously potentially wrapping any piping that's going to have water in it at all times and or more often than not. So like the pipes going from your gutter horizontally and down, you really don't have to worry about those ones. Those are about 3-inch diameter and hopefully typically kind of like that 3-wall piping. That stuff, for one, isn't going to have a full it's not going to be full of water, so it's not going to expand enough to ever blow up there. Where you're going to have to worry about that water freezing, expanding is either in that first flow, the flow diverter, or outlets, and then any piping that's coming close, and then that's going to have water in it at all times. There's some ways to go about keeping all that water in that system, but allowing it to be full and potentially maybe not insulated, is what we call a drip emitter. At your outflow, where you're using it at your valve, you can put in this little side valve that has a small hole in it. And so when water starts to expand and want to freeze, this is going to allow water to continue to move through the system and get out instead of expand and explode or burst your pipes. I can send out some materials on what the idea of that is too. But it's the type of pipe you're using. Schedule 4D is your thicker end of any kind of PVCs. That's the most recommended. And then it's just a pretty basic wrap, insulation wrap. They have the sticky ones, they have the tie-ons, they have a bunch of different kinds of insulation wrap for pipe along with different diameters. So if you're ever worried about it, probably just wrap it and you're not gonna have an issue with it. But yeah, you probably should be wrapping your pipes, especially if this is a system that you're going to be using often throughout the year. You just want to keep it running well and being ready for use whenever you needed it too. So those are the worst, is trying to fix busted pipes. You're going to lose your water potentially out of your system if that happens, especially at a low point, which usually happens at the low points. So yeah, keeping things insulated. Like you can kind of see at the bottom of this picture, it's hard to read, but it's got the tank outlet there. It's below the first flow diverter. It almost looks like they have a little stand for it, and there's a little box. That's a point where you can actually put a box there with some pieces of wall insulation inside of it. Different kind of foams are really good for insulation. So just kind of wrapping it or boxing it in foam at that outlet, you'll be able to use it throughout the year, and you don't have to worry about it bursting at you in the middle of the night and then you don't have any water the next morning. So yes, think about freezing conditions, but the tanks themselves, they should be okay. If you got a chance to kind of put it in the south facing, that'd be the best. Then you can, have more and a better potential to use it in the wintertime. And then, it's better for pipes too, it just lowers the chance of freezing and bursting, because even a good wrap job, sometimes we get a good freeze, and just the sheer exposure over time will make things burst. So great question, and definitely consider freezing.
Appreciate that, Taylor. Next question is, I think this is on most people's minds, but is there a preferred paint to use on the plastic barrels? Maybe what's the best? I know we've had experience with sanding and then priming, and then painting just using like a latex based, I believe. But do you have any preferences?
I don't think I've ever like painted on, brushed or rolled on an actual paint. I think most of the time, if we've ever needed to use or fix a clear or transparent one, was just white spray painting primer with then a darker or a black spray paint over that. It takes about 2 cans of each to get a full solid base coat, and then 2 cans of your colored paint to put on top of that, and then that should do it. I don't have a particular brand or anything I go for. Usually try to go for the cheapest, so it seems to work. Yeah, it's all about that sanding and getting that roughed up layer and that really first good base of primer to hold it, and then you should be fine after that. But yeah, no real preference. Most paints are pretty decent these days.
Yeah, and I know, we're trying to reach like those who want to collect a lot of water for fire protection, just resilience alone with, an emergency, and then just touching back with this can be for like any private residence, and you can have a 50-gallon rain barrel or 55-gallon rain barrel that you're just going to fill up quickly in Washington State. But the next question is related to that. So is routine cleaning required, and how would you do so? And I think that's also based off the size of catchment that you have.
Yeah, great question. So I can kind of go to a picture that will really help in a couple ways. Well, yeah, these will be okay. So like if you're just going with the rain barrel, our typical 55 gallon rain barrel, when we install those or use those in the houses, we put the outlet valve about 3 to 5 inches from the bottom. That's what we consider our sump. It's going to collect a lot of that things that don't get through, or that get through all of the little filters and screens. And so that's your first step in like getting any of that material out. And so that's going to build up over time. And then in most catchment systems, you're going to have a gap off the bottom. That's that natural sump you want. So there are always going to be something at the bottom of it at any point, especially after being used a lot and through a heavy rain year, or if you're around a lot of trees, you're definitely going to potentially get stuff on the bottom. And with a lot of these systems, with the blue totes or the blue rain barrels, and then are those bigger totes that you've seen here, even the big cisterns, these totes here, the best thing to do, and they all have lids, whether they're 2-inch round or about 5-inch round like they are on these totes, you just at any point that you're close to drying or using up all the water, use up all that water while you're at that point, give it a good spray down with the valves open, just keep spraying it, flushing it. You can do shot backs to clean out gunk at the bottom, but just flushing it out over and over should pretty well get the gunk or anything at the bottom if ever it gets that point. But then just kind of routine water maintenance, there's a few things you can do, and that's pretty basic, and it's just a little bit of bleach. It's pretty safe for watering your plants and things like that, and even animals and livestock if you're using the correct amounts. But if you're using it for livestock and watering your vegetables, and you're keeping a good size of it, it's typically about 1/8 of a teaspoon for I want to say per 5 gallons. I will double check, but it's a very small amount. You don't need a lot, and you do that every couple months within your rain barrel system. You really if you're going to be doing that, you want to not use that water for about 24 hours. Let that chlorine kind of filter through the whole system and get in and get absorbed by the water. But a bleach regimen is always recommended for if you're using it for livestock and irrigation. But it just takes very little. And
if I could add to that, your bleach that you'll use for this is, if you look at the side of your bleach bottle in your laundry room, it's sodium hypochlorite.
Yeah.
And sodium hypochlorite is going to combine with the water molecules, and that's what Taylor's talking about. If you give it 24 hours, that sodium hypochlorite is going to be totally broken down, and the sodium part of it is actually going to attack a lot of the bacteria and break it apart. So it's a really nice thing, and it doesn't take much. Like you said, I used to use it in Texas all the time to put in the water troughs to keep the bacteria from growing in there. And yeah, it's totally safe to drink after a while, and let it go. That's a really, really good way to go.
Yeah. Go ahead.
May I put something in there?
Yep.
Please use bleach that is not scented.
Yes.
Oh yes.
Please. That is an easy one to forget, but yes, the non-scented is what you want.
Yeah.
That was perfect.
Great. I believe that was one of our last questions. But yeah, it seems like doing a cleaning on a yearly, just annual basis, probably at the end of the dry year before the start of the more wetter months that we can have here and anywhere else you all are watching from. Yeah, and then I can, for folks who are more curious about how much bleach to use, I can email everyone the formula afterwards with a few also resources that we talked about during this webinar. So I can send out an email to those who registered through our website.
Could you send that material to me too, and I can post it in our, have it posted on our website?
Perfect. Yes, I can send that to you also, Rhonda.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Bruce Spong has had an indicator on his picture indicating he's got a hand up. Bruce, did you have something you wanted to add, or was that an accidental marker there? Can you answer?
That was from the vote a long time ago.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, thanks again for coming out. And I just want to, again, reiterate, like, reaching out to the district if you have any more questions or concerns or just anything about your property, anything about rainwater, livestock. Again, Michael is always available to answer questions. He's great at it. And then between myself, Sarah, and others, we can hopefully get any of your questions and or potentially come out to check out what you have going on. And then maybe even just checking out what dream projects you think you want to get going with this rainwater collection, and we can point you in the right direction and assist you there too.
Well, thank you very much for doing this for us. Is there anyone that's got any parting questions or comments before we wrap this up this evening? Mary O'Farrell?
Looks like an applause.
Okay, very good. For those of you who are not members or who are unfamiliar with the Camano Preparedness Group, if you'd like more information, you can go to our website. It is CamanoPreparednessGroup.org. So you can find out all kinds of information on us there. If there's nothing else, I thank everyone for attending this evening, and I give a special thank you to Sarah and Tyler and Michael for pulling this off for us and for their patience with me as I figure out what I'm doing on this end.
No worries.
I hope that we can, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, no worries. Yeah, we really appreciate you all having us and letting us crash your meeting.
Not a crash. We were happy to have you.
Thank
We
you.
hope to see you for next month's meeting. It will be August the what? Oh, I've lost my calendar. It's the second Thursday of August, and it will be at 7 o'clock. If you're interested, check our website. It will have the information on the Zoom ID and the password. So until then, again, thank you and have a good evening, guys.
August 13th.
August 13th. Thank you, Sue. So good evening, all. Enjoy
Thank
your
you.
evening.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
As we all drop off.
Yeah, one by one by one. I'm waiting to see if anybody's got any last minute questions before I go away.
I might have to get in touch with Taylor to find out about his veterans group. I don't know diddly about farming and rainwater installation, but that would be a great way to learn.
Yes, it would be.
So I guess I could contact him at the extension office.
Yeah, or contact the Snohomish County Conservation District. You can get a hold of him there as well.
Okay, conservation district. Got it. All right. Thank you for hosting this.
You're welcome. See you later.
Yeah, bye.